My cousin demanded that I give her my house as a wedding gift. When Jessica called me 3 weeks before her wedding, I thought she wanted to ask me to be a bridesmaid or help with decorations. Instead, she started the conversation by saying she needed to discuss my contribution to her new life. I'm Sarah, and Jessica and I had always been close growing up. Our moms are sisters, and we spent every summer together at our grandmother's farm. But Jessica had been acting strange ever since I inherited my house from my great-aunt Patricia last year. I've been thinking about what would be most meaningful, Jessica said in this weird formal tone I'd never heard from her. And I think you should give me and Marcus your house as our wedding gift. I laughed because I thought she was joking. My house was worth $400,000, but Jessica wasn't laughing. She said it would be perfect for them to start their family, and she was sure I'd understand once I really thought about it. I told her that was completely impossible, and asked where this was even coming from. Jessica got quiet for a moment, then said, Sarah, you know this house was never really meant to be yours alone. I had no idea what she meant. Great-aunt Patricia had left the house specifically to me in her will. I was her only niece who'd stayed in touch, visited her regularly, helped her with grocery shopping and doctor appointments. The inheritance made perfect sense. But Jessica seemed confident that I'd change my mind. She said she'd give me time to think about it, but she needed an answer by the end of the week. Then she hung up. I called my mom to tell her about the bizarre conversation. Instead of agreeing that Jessica was being ridiculous, my mom got uncomfortable and said, maybe I should consider all perspectives before making any decisions. When I pressed her about what that meant, she said Jessica might have valid points about the house situation. Then she quickly changed the subject to wedding planning details. The next day, Jessica's mom, my Aunt Linda, showed up at my house unannounced. She'd never visited before, not once in the year I'd lived here. She walked around my living room like she was evaluating it, commenting on the original hardwood floors and vintage fixtures. Patricia always said this house should stay in the family, Linda said, running her fingers along the mantelpiece. She had very specific ideas about how things should be passed down. I mentioned that the house was staying in the family, with me. Linda gave me this look like I was missing something obvious. She said Patricia had made certain arrangements that I might not be aware of yet. Before I could ask what she meant, Linda said she had to leave but hoped I'd make the right choice about Jessica's wedding gift. The way she said it made it sound like there was only one correct answer. That night, I went through all the paperwork from Patricia's estate again. The will was straightforward. The house and its contents were left to me. But Linda's comment about arrangements kept bothering me. I started looking more carefully through the documents. Buried in a stack of utility bills, I found a folder I'd never opened before. Inside were legal papers I didn't understand, something about a trust and specific conditions. The more I read, the more confused I became. There were references to promises made to family members and obligations that needed to be fulfilled. Some of the language suggested the inheritance wasn't as simple as I'd thought. Jessica called again 2 days later. This time she sounded less polite and more demanding. She said she'd talked to a lawyer who confirmed her position, and she was prepared to take legal action if I didn't cooperate. I asked what legal position she could possibly have. Jessica said, Sarah, Patricia made promises to our grandmother about that house, promises that you're now required to keep. I'd never heard anything about promises to our grandmother, who'd died 5 years ago. But Jessica spoke with such certainty, like she had information I didn't. She said she'd be coming over on Saturday to discuss the transition timeline and expected me to have made the right decision by then. When I tried to argue, she cut me off and said I'd understand everything once she showed me what Patricia had left for me to find. That's when I realized Jessica knew something about my inheritance that I didn't. I stare at the folder in my hands, my heart pounding against my ribs. What promises? What obligations? I've spent the past year believing that Patricia left me this house because she loved me, because I was the only one who bothered to visit her. Now it feels like the floor is shifting beneath my feet. The next morning, I wake early and begin a methodical search of the house. If Jessica knows something I don't, I need to find it before she arrives on Saturday. I start in Patricia's study, the one room I've barely touched since moving in. The antique desk drawers yield nothing unusual, just old bills, birthday cards, and faded photographs. In the master bedroom, I check under the mattress, behind drawers, inside every book on the shelves. Hours pass, and I'm about to give up when I notice the loose floorboard beneath the window seat. My fingers tremble as I pry it up and reach into the small cavity. Inside is a leather portfolio tied with a faded ribbon. The first document I pull out is yellowed with age, the legal language dense and formal. I scan the pages, certain phrases jumping out at me. Family lineage protection, multi-generational occupancy, conditional transfer of ownership. I grab my phone and call Mr. Hargrove, the attorney who handled Patricia's estate. Sarah, he says when I identify myself, I've been expecting your call. You have? My voice sounds small, even to my own ears. I assume you found the trust documents? He sounds resigned, almost apologetic. I think so. Mr. Hargrove, What is all this? Why wasn't this included with the will? There's a long pause before he answers. The will is legally binding, Sarah. The house is yours, but there were verbal agreements that Patricia made. Family matters that she chose to keep separate. Verbal agreements with who? Jessica? Our grandmother? I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics. His voice has taken on that careful, measured tone lawyers use when they're avoiding saying something important. Patricia was very clear about how things should proceed. But you're my attorney, I protest. You're supposed to represent my interests. I represented Patricia's estate. He corrects me gently, and I fulfilled my legal obligations. Whatever else is happening between you and your family, well, that's beyond the scope of my services. After he hangs up, I sit on Patricia's bed, surrounded by papers I don't fully understand. One thing is clear, there's more to this inheritance than a simple bequest. I spend the afternoon photographing every document I can find, creating digital copies that no one can take from me. Then I drive to the hardware store and buy security cameras for the front and back doors. I'm not taking any chances with Jessica's visit tomorrow. By evening, I've installed the cameras and checked them 3 times. I can view the feeds from my phone, which gives me a small sense of control in this increasingly unsettling situation. Saturday morning arrives with a knot in my stomach. At precisely 11 a.m., a black SUV pulls into my driveway. Jessica steps out first, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Marcus follows, his navy suit and polished shoes making this look more like a business meeting than a family visit. Sarah, Jessica says as I open the door. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I want to point out that I never actually agreed to anything, but I step aside to let them in. Marcus carries a leather briefcase that makes my anxiety spike. Would you like some coffee? I offer, playing for time. No, thank you, Jessica says, her gaze already sweeping the living room. We have quite a bit to discuss. We sit in the living room, me on the armchair, Jessica and Marcus on the sofa across from me. Jessica reaches into a large handbag and pulls out a photo album. I thought you should see these, she says, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. The album contains dozens of photos of Patricia with our grandmother. In many of them, they're sitting in this very living room. There's one of them in the garden, arms around each other's shoulders, their resemblance striking despite not being blood relatives. They were inseparable, Jessica says softly. Did you know that? I nod. Patricia talked about Grandma all the time. Then you know they had an understanding about this house. Marcus clears his throat. If I may, he says, opening his briefcase. There's a legal concept called an oral family agreement. It predates any written will and can sometimes take precedence, especially when there's evidence of long-standing family understanding. What are you talking about? I ask, though I'm starting to see where this is going. Jessica leans forward. Sarah, when we were children, grandmother and Patricia made an arrangement. This house was always meant to stay in the family, but specifically for the first granddaughter to marry. That's ridiculous, I say. Patricia never mentioned anything like that to me. You were too young to remember, Jessica says, but I was there. I was 9 when they made the promise. You were only 4. She pulls out another photo, this one showing Jessica as a child, sitting between Patricia and our grandmother on the porch swing. They're all smiling, and Jessica is holding what looks like a small wooden house in her hands. They gave me this dollhouse as a symbol, Jessica says, a promise that someday, when I got married, the real house would be mine. Patricia knew that. Everyone knew that. My mind races, trying to reconcile this with everything I thought I knew. But the will was a formality. Marcus interrupts. A temporary measure. Patricia needed someone to care for the house until Jessica was ready to claim it. That's why she left it to you. She knew you'd take good care of it. That's not true, I say, my voice stronger now. Patricia left me this house because she wanted me to have it. She told me so herself, many times. Jessica's expression hardens slightly. Sarah, I understand this is difficult, but I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Marcus and I need to know when we can move in. The movers need a date. The audacity of her assumption leaves me speechless for a moment. She's already planning to move in, as if my refusal isn't even a possibility she's considering. I'm not giving you my house, Jessica, I say finally. I don't care what childhood promise you think was made. This is my home. Jessica and Marcus exchange a look I can't quite interpret. We were hoping you'd be reasonable, Jessica says quietly. For the sake of family harmony. Family harmony? I repeat, incredulous. You're demanding my house as a wedding gift, and you're talking about harmony? Marcus places a hand on Jessica's arm, a subtle gesture of restraint. Perhaps we should show Sarah the other documents, he suggests. Jessica nods, reaching for her bag again. Sarah, there's something else you need to see. Something Patricia left specifically for you to find. After Jessica and Marcus leave, I sit alone in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of their visit, the photo album still open on the coffee table, the lingering tension in the air. My hands shake as I pour myself a glass of water. The audacity of their demand still stuns me, but beneath my anger is a nagging doubt. What if there really was some agreement I don't remember? First thing Monday morning, I call a lawyer. Not Mr. Hargrove, who handled Patricia's estate, but someone new, someone with no connection to my family or their supposed arrangements. Miss Reyes meets me in her downtown office, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes who listens without interrupting as I explain the situation and show her copies of all the documents I've found. "Let me be clear," she says after reviewing everything. "Based on what you've shown me, the house is legally yours. The will was properly executed and probated. This so-called oral family agreement your cousin is referring to? It holds no legal weight against a valid will. But what about the trust documents I found? The ones mentioning family obligations?" She taps her pen against the papers. "These appear to be draft documents that were never executed. There are no signatures, no notary stamps. Patricia may have considered creating a family trust at some point, but she ultimately chose to leave you the house outright." Relief floods through me. "So, Jessica has no claim?" "Not legally, no. But family pressure can be its own form of coercion." Miss Reyes gives me a sympathetic look. "Be prepared for things to get messier before they get better." She's right. By Tuesday, the text messages start. First from Jessica. "I'm disappointed you're being so selfish about this. Grandmother would be heartbroken." Then from Aunt Linda. "We need to have a family meeting about Patricia's house." My mother calls 3 times, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails about family harmony and considering the bigger picture. I ignore them all, focusing instead on work and trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. But on Thursday afternoon, I come home to find 3 cars in my driveway: Aunt Linda's SUV, my mother's sedan, and an unfamiliar Buick. Linda opens the door before I can even get my key out. "There you are! We've been waiting for over an hour." I step inside to find my living room filled with family members, my mother looking uncomfortable on the couch, Uncle Bob, Linda's husband, standing by the fireplace, and 2 elderly women I recognize as my grandmother's sisters, Aunt Edith and Aunt Mabel. "What is this?" I ask, setting down my bag. "A family discussion," Linda says, as if it's perfectly normal to invade someone's home with a surprise intervention. "Aunt Edith and Aunt Mabel have some things you need to hear about Patricia and your grandmother's wishes." Aunt Edith, who must be at least 85, peers at me through thick glasses. "Patricia always intended for this house to go to the first granddaughter to marry. It was decided years ago." "That's not what her will says," I counter, trying to keep my voice steady. "Legal papers aren't everything," Aunt Mabel chimes in. "Family promises matter too." For the next hour, I listen to a carefully orchestrated guilt trip about family tradition and broken promises. My mother says little, occasionally giving me apologetic glances but never actually defending me. When they finally leave, I feel drained and angry not just at them, but at Patricia too. Why would she leave me in this position? That night, unable to sleep, I decide to check the attic. If there are more secrets hidden in this house, I need to find them before Jessica does. The pull-down ladder creaks as I climb into the dusty space, my flashlight beam cutting through cobwebs and shadows. I methodically search through old trunks and boxes, finding nothing but holiday decorations and outdated clothing. I'm about to give up when my foot catches on an uneven floorboard. Kneeling down, I notice it's slightly raised compared to the others. When I press on one end, the opposite side lifts enough for me to get my fingers underneath. The hidden compartment isn't large, maybe a foot square and a few inches deep, but it contains a leather-bound diary and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with faded ribbon. I bring them downstairs, my heart pounding as I open the diary to the first page. "Property of Eleanor Wilson, my grandmother." I read until dawn, piecing together a story I never knew. According to the diary, Jessica's parents, Linda and Bob, had loaned Patricia money 30 years ago when she was struggling financially. The entries suggest this loan was what allowed Patricia to keep the house during a difficult time. But tucked between the diary pages is something else, a receipt and a handwritten note from Patricia to Linda dated 15 years ago. "With this final payment, our debt is settled in full. Thank you for your help all those years ago. But as we agreed, the loan is now repaid with interest." The next morning, I'm awakened by my phone ringing. It's Miss Reyes. "Sarah, I've just been served with papers. Jessica has filed for a preliminary injunction to prevent you from selling or making any changes to the house. She's claiming there's a constructive trust based on family agreements. She can do that? She can try. It won't hold up in court based on what we know, but it means this is now a legal battle, not just a family disagreement." After hanging up, I check my mailbox and find an envelope with no return address. Inside is a single sheet of paper with words cut from magazines, like an old-fashioned ransom note. "The house belongs to Jessica. Move out or regret it." I stare at the threat, a chill running through me despite the warm morning. This isn't just about a house anymore. This is about something darker, something that makes me wonder how far Jessica is willing to go to get what she wants. I take the note inside and add it to my growing file of evidence. Whatever game Jessica is playing, I'm not backing down. This house is mine, and I'm prepared to fight for it in court and anywhere else necessary. The court date arrives faster than I expected. 2 weeks from Jessica's preliminary injunction filing, I'm sitting in a sterile conference room with Miss Reyes, reviewing our strategy one last time before the hearing. They're going to try to make this emotional, Miss. Reyes says, organizing documents into her leather portfolio. The judge doesn't care about childhood promises or family traditions. Stay focused on the legal facts. I found something interesting yesterday, she continues, sliding a document across the table. Patricia updated her will just 8 months before she died. It wasn't a minor revision, she completely rewrote it. The previous version had some language about family considerations, but she deliberately removed all of that. I stare at the document comparison, the deleted text highlighted in red. She knew this would happen. It certainly appears she anticipated some family conflict. Miss Reyes agrees. This strengthens our position considerably. Outside the conference room, I spot my mother sitting alone in the courthouse hallway, looking uncomfortable in her rarely worn pantsuit. She stands when she sees me, her expression a mixture of guilt and worry. I need to talk to you, she says quietly, before we go in there. Miss Reyes gives me a questioning look, and I nod that it's okay. I'll meet you inside. My mother leads me to a quiet corner by a window overlooking the parking lot. There are things you don't know, Sarah, things about Jessica's family. Like what? I cross my arms, preparing for another attempt to make me surrender the house. Linda and Bob are in serious financial trouble. They remortgaged their house 3 times to pay for Jessica's college, then her graduate school, and now this ridiculous wedding. She sighs deeply. They're underwater on everything, credit cards, car loans. Bob's business is failing. What does that have to do with my house? They've been counting on Jessica getting Patricia's house. Linda's been telling everyone for years that Jessica would inherit it eventually. She looks away, unable to meet my eyes. They've already spent money they don't have, assuming they'd have the house to solve their problems. I feel a chill run through me. What do you mean spent money they don't have? I don't know the details, she says, but something in her voice makes me think she knows more than she's saying. The courtroom doors open, and people begin filing in. Jessica arrives with Marcus and her parents, all dressed in expensive suits that make me wonder how many credit cards they maxed out to maintain appearances. The hearing itself is brief and anticlimactic. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviews the documents from both sides, then denies Jessica's request for an injunction, citing insufficient evidence of any binding agreement outside the will. The court cannot enforce vague family understandings or childhood promises, she states firmly. The will is clear and legally executed. Unless the plaintiff can produce actual documentation of a prior agreement signed by the deceased, this matter is settled. Jessica's face flushes red with anger, and I catch Linda whispering furiously to Marcus as they gather their things. Outside the courtroom, I overhear Linda on her phone. It didn't go through. We need more time with the buyers. Buyers? The word stops me in my tracks. That night, I can't sleep. My mother's revelation and Linda's phone conversation keep replaying in my mind. On a hunch, I search online for local real estate listings, scrolling through dozens of properties until I find it a listing for 1428 Maple Street, my address. The house is listed as coming soon, with Jessica's name as the contact agent. They've already listed my house for sale, before they even had it. I forward the listing to Miss Reyes with shaking hands, then call an emergency family meeting for the next day. I send the message to everyone: my mother, Jessica and Marcus, Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob, even the elderly great-aunts. This ends now. They arrive the following evening, filing into my living room with varying degrees of defiance and discomfort. Jessica looks ready for battle in a crisp blazer, while Linda keeps checking her phone nervously. Thank you all for coming, I begin, standing by the fireplace. I've called you here because it's time we put all our cards on the table. I turn to Jessica. I know you've already listed this house for sale, before you even had a legal claim to it. The room goes silent. Marcus shifts uncomfortably while Linda's face drains of color. That's ridiculous, Jessica says, but her voice lacks conviction. I hold up my phone, displaying the listing. It's right here, Jessica. Your name, my address, listed as coming soon. Care to explain why you're selling a house you don't own? It was just preparation, Marcus interjects, in case the court ruled in our favor. Stop lying, my mother says suddenly, surprising everyone. This has gone too far. Linda stands up, her hands trembling. You have no idea what we've been through. Bob's business is failing. The wedding has cost us everything. We need this house. So this was never about family traditions or promises to grandmother, I say quietly. This was about money all along. Jessica's composure finally cracks. Fine. Yes, we need the money. We're drowning in debt. The wedding alone is costing over $100,000. Marcus lost his job 3 months ago, and we've been putting everything on credit cards. Marcus looks at the floor. My parents refused to help unless we had a solid plan to pay them back. When Jessica mentioned this house, Marcus looks at the floor. You decided to steal it from me. I finish for him. It wasn't stealing, Jessica snaps. Patricia always favored you. It wasn't fair. Favored me? I laugh incredulously. I was the only one who visited her. The only one who drove her to doctor appointments and helped with her groceries. Where were you, Jessica? Where was anyone in this family when Patricia needed help? Linda rises to her daughter's defense. Patricia was always difficult, after what she did to my mother. What are you talking about? I interrupt. Your precious great-aunt Patricia stole my mother's inheritance. Linda says bitterly. They were supposed to split their parents' estate, but Patricia manipulated the will. My mother never got her fair share. We've been waiting decades for justice. The room erupts into chaotic arguing, decades of resentment bubbling to the surface. Through the noise, I catch Jessica whispering to Marcus about the buyer's deadline and losing the deposit. Enough! I shout, silencing everyone. This stops now. Jessica, I know you've already accepted money for this house. I'm guessing you have a closing date scheduled soon, probably right after your wedding. Jessica's stunned expression confirms my suspicion. Here's what's going to happen. I continue. I'm willing to help your parents with a reasonable loan, not a gift to address their immediate financial problems. But this house is mine, and it's staying mine. The court has already ruled. It's over. We don't need your charity. Jessica spits, but Bob places a restraining hand on her arm. Actually, Jessica, he says quietly, we might need to consider Sarah's offer. Jessica stands up abruptly. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you're doing to this family. She grabs her purse and storms out, Marcus trailing behind her. Linda follows, pausing at the door to deliver a final barb. Patricia would be ashamed of you. After they leave, only my mother remains, looking exhausted by the whole ordeal. You did the right thing, she says softly. Patricia knew exactly what she was doing when she left you this house. She knew you were the only one who wouldn't sell it for quick cash. I sink onto the couch, suddenly drained. Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner? Family loyalty is complicated, she sighs. I thought maybe they deserved a chance to work things out with you directly. I never imagined they'd go this far. As she leaves, I walk through the quiet house, my house touching the walls that have witnessed generations of family drama. I think about Patricia, alone here for so many years, perhaps knowing all along what would happen after she was gone. Whatever Jessica tries next, I'm ready. This house isn't just property to me, it's a responsibility, a trust. And unlike some people in my family, I understand what that means. The judge's gavel strikes with a finality that seems to echo through the courtroom. Motion denied. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any legally binding agreement, superseding the will of Patricia Wilson. This case is dismissed. I exhale slowly, feeling the tension of the past weeks begin to dissolve. Beside me, Miss Reyes gives my arm a quick squeeze, her professional demeanor barely concealing her satisfaction. Across the aisle, Jessica's face is a storm of emotions, disbelief, rage, and something that looks almost like panic. We'll appeal, Marcus whispers loudly to her, but the judge overhears. Mr. Daniels, you're welcome to waste more of your time and money, but I strongly advise against it. This was a clear-cut case. She gathers her papers and stands. Court is adjourned. Outside in the hallway, Jessica brushes past me without a word, but Linda pauses long enough to hiss, "This isn't over," before hurrying after her daughter. Bob lingers behind, looking defeated in a way that makes me almost pity him. Sarah, he says quietly, we should talk sometime. About arrangements. I nod, remembering my offer of financial help. Call me next week. That evening, I return to the house, my house feeling both victorious and exhausted. The legal battle is over, but the family wounds still feel raw and exposed. As I unlock the front door, I notice an envelope tucked into the doorframe. My name is written on it in Patricia's distinctive handwriting. My hands tremble as I open it. Inside is a letter dated just 2 weeks before Patricia died. My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, then things have unfolded as I expected. The house is yours now, and I imagine the family hasn't taken it well. I want you to know that I made this decision with complete clarity. For years, I've watched Jessica and her parents view this house as their salvation, not as a home, but as an asset to be liquidated. Linda has been planning to sell it since before your grandmother passed away. What they don't understand is that this house was never meant to be a windfall for anyone. Your grandmother and I agreed long ago that it should remain a home for family who would cherish it, not sell it off for quick profit. You were the only one who visited me without wanting something, the only one who saw me as a person, not an obstacle between them and an inheritance. There will be pressure, there will be guilt. Stand firm, Sarah. This house is where your grandmother and I built our lives. Honor that by making it truly yours. With all my love, Patricia. I sit on the stairs, clutching the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. All this time, Patricia had known exactly what would happen. She'd seen through Jessica's occasional visits and Linda's transparent interest in the historical features of the house. The next morning, I meet with Miss Reyes one last time to finalize everything. She helps me draft a letter to Bob and Linda, offering a $50,000 loan with reasonable terms enough to help with their immediate financial troubles without enabling Jessica's extravagant wedding plans. You're being more generous than most people would be, Miss Reyes says as she reviews the document. It's not about being generous, I reply. It's about doing what Patricia would have wanted, helping family without enabling their worst instincts. 3 weeks later, Jessica and Marcus's wedding happens without me. My mother attends and reports back that it was scaled down considerably from their original plans, no 7-tier cake or string quartet, just a modest ceremony at a local hotel. The honeymoon to Bali has been canceled too. Linda looked miserable the entire time, my mother says over coffee in my kitchen, and Jessica barely smiled in any of the photos. I think they're still in shock that their plan fell apart. Did they take the loan? I ask. Bob did, against Linda's wishes. He's using it to restructure their mortgage. She sips her coffee thoughtfully. Jessica won't speak your name. By the way, she refers to you as she who shall not be named. I laugh despite myself. Well, at least she's being creative about her grudge. Over the next few months, I throw myself into making the house truly mine. I repaint the living room, replace the aging water heater, and plant a garden in the backyard. But the house feels too big for just me, and I find myself wandering its rooms at night, thinking about Patricia's words about it being a home for family. An idea begins to form, and by fall, I've converted the separate guest suite above the garage into a comfortable apartment. The first tenant is Mrs. Caldwell, my grandmother's best friend, who recently sold her own home because maintaining it had become too difficult at 82. Patricia would have loved this, Mrs. Caldwell says as she arranges her favorite armchair by the window. She always said this house had room for more love in it. Slowly, tentatively, the family begins to heal. My mother visits more often, sometimes bringing cousins or aunts who gradually stop mentioning Jessica's rightful claim to the house. Even Aunt Edith, who had been one of Jessica's strongest supporters, admits during Thanksgiving dinner that I've done right by the old place. 6 months after the wedding, I receive a text from an unknown number. Can we talk? Jay. We meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. Jessica looks different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and none of the polished perfection I remember. Marcus left, she says without preamble. 3 months after the wedding. Turns out he was only interested in the money he thought we'd get from selling your house. I'm sorry, I say, and I mean it. No, I'm sorry. She stares into her untouched coffee. I was horrible to you. I convinced myself I deserved that house, that Patricia had somehow cheated me by leaving it to you. She looks up, her eyes red-rimmed. I was so focused on what I thought I was owed that I couldn't see what was right in front of me, which was that you were the only one who actually cared about Patricia. Not what she could give you, but her. Jessica wipes away a tear. I've been thinking a lot about what Grandma would say if she could see how I behaved. We talk for almost 2 hours, unraveling years of misunderstandings and resentments. It's not a perfect reconciliation, too much has happened for that, but it's a beginning. By the 1-year anniversary of the court case, I've established a family trust for the house, with clear guidelines about its use and maintenance. It will never be sold for profit, but family members can apply to live there during times of need, with the understanding that it remains a shared legacy. Jessica is the first to sign the trust agreement, her signature a symbol of how far we've come. As we stand in Patricia's my living room, I think about how houses contain more than just people and furniture. They hold our stories, our mistakes, our reconciliations. She knew, didn't she? Jessica asks quietly. Patricia knew exactly what would happen. I nod, looking around at the home that caused so much conflict and, ultimately, healing. She knew we'd find our way back to what really matters. Outside, Mrs. Caldwell is planting tulip bulbs in the garden, preparing for a spring that Patricia won't see but would have loved. Some inheritances, I've learned, are worth far more than their dollar value. Some are measured in the lessons they teach us about what family really means.